There is a sealed jar on a wooden shelf in the back of a storage room in Kyoto. A dusty ceramic vessel that has not been touched in over 80 years. Its surfaces are patterned with a faint white crust. Not mold, but the crystallized trace of a plum wine brewed in the summer of 1938 and then deliberately forgotten. The woman who made it placed her thumbprint into the clay lid while it was still wet, a seal meant to be broken only by her granddaughter, and that granddaughter never came. That jar is a time capsule of an era when preservation was not just about food but about memory, about the stubborn belief that some flavors must be held in suspension until the right hands release them. But here is the part that unsettles most people who hear this story. The jar was never meant to be opened at all. The woman who sealed it knew she would not live to see the wine poured. She prepared it as a gift across years, a message in a bottle for a descendant she would never meet. And when the granddaughter finally arrived, she refused to break the seal. So the jar remains, sitting in the same spot, its contents aging far beyond anything the original brewer could have intended. The liquid inside now, more memory than wine. If you have ever inherited a jar from a relative and hesitated to open it, feeling that to uncork it would somehow erase a presence that still lingers, then you already know the weight of that decision. The aroma of hesitation is a quiet thing. A scent of dust and old paper and invisible regret. Now consider the modern kitchen, where a jar is just a container, a transient holder for sauces that get used up within weeks. The pantry is a place of constant turnover, of rotation, of expiration dates. But this Kyoto jar operates on an entirely different logic. It is a living archive, a fermentation vessel that has never been washed, never scrubbed, never touched by detergent. Its interior crust is a palimpsest of every batch of plums it ever held, each layer a record of a different season's rainfall, a different grandmother's hands. The same crust that a modern health inspector would condemn is, in the logic of the old Japanese condiment houses, the soul of the pot. A chef I interviewed in Osaka, whose family has run a pickling shop for 11 generations, told me about their black miso pots, inherited directly from the early Edo period. Those pots have never seen soap. They have never been rinsed. They are seasoned with 3.5 centuries of fermentation. And the surface inside is black as lacquer, smooth as polished stone. When a new pot is purchased, it must be brought to life by borrowing a handful of residue from an old pot, a practice that science now calls microbial inoculation and grandmothers once called sharing the breath. That practice of sharing the breath to bring a new pot to life is something our grandmothers understood long before science gave it a name. If you want to keep uncovering these quiet culinary truths, come back for the next chapter. Let me know in the comments. Is there a pan or a pot in your kitchen you have never dared to scrub clean? That is the paradox at the heart of this story. The pot that is never washed holds more life than the pot that is stripped raw after every meal. And the jar that is never opened holds more promise than any wine that is drunk. What the granddaughter understood, perhaps intuitively, was that the seal was not a barrier to the wine, but a part of its meaning. To open it would be to collapse time, to turn a suspended moment into a consumed one, and she could not bring herself to erase that suspension. So the jar is still there, and the liquid inside has now been aging for more than 8 decades. Let us pause and consider what that means chemically. The alcohol content of a Plum wine from 1938 would have long since evaporated if the seal were imperfect. But this seal was handmade. A clay lid pressed into a clay mouth, left to dry and shrink into a near-hermetic grip. Over the years, microscopic amounts of oxygen did seep in, and the wine slowly oxidized, not spoiled, but transformed. The sugars crystallized, the tannins softened, the fruit collapsed into a dark amber syrup with a scent that no living person has described. And here is the beautiful part. In 2019, a researcher from Tokyo University of Agriculture was allowed to examine the jar without opening it. They used a non-invasive ultrasound probe to map the density of the contents. What they found was not a liquid, but a viscous gel, a substance that had polymerized over time into something closer to a jam than a drink. The plum pits had settled to the bottom, their fractures sealed by the hardening syrup. The jar had become a fossil of its own making, but the granddaughter still refused to open it. When the researcher explained that the contents were scientifically significant, that they could be analyzed for microbial strains from the pre-war era, she asked a quiet question. She said, "If you open it, does it stop being the jar my grandmother sealed?" And the researcher had no answer. This is the moment where the 2 timelines converge. In one timeline, the Kyoto jar sits untouched, a monument to a promise kept across decades. In the other timeline, a home cook in modern-day London inherits her own grandmother's jangdok, a Korean fermentation pot that has been passed down through 4 generations. She finds it in the basement of the old family home, filled with a dark paste that her mother cannot identify. The mother says, "Throw it away. It is too old." But the daughter hesitates. She scrapes a tiny sample from the edge, tastes it, and finds a depth of flavor that no shop-bought gochujang has ever given her. The gochujang in that jangdok had not been stirred in 20 years. The mold layers had formed a protective crust, and underneath, the paste had continued to ferment at a glacial pace, concentrating umami compounds beyond anything the original batch could have achieved. That daughter now runs a small restaurant in Hackney, where she serves that same gochujang, diluted with fresh paste to make it last. And she tells every customer the story of the pot. She never washed it. She only wiped the outside with a damp cloth, careful not to disturb the seasoning. And this is where the emotional connection deepens. If you have ever scraped a pan and wondered what flavor you were washing away, you know the quiet guilt of erasing a meal's ghost. If you have ever inherited a kitchen tool from a loved one and felt that using it was a form of conversation, then you have already tasted the same truth that the Kyoto granddaughter and the Hackney chef discovered. The pot does not only hold food, it holds the sequence of all the hands that have touched it, all the meals that have passed through it, all the seasons that have stained its surface. The science of lipid polymerization backs this up. Every time oil is heated in a pan, some of those fats bond to the metal or ceramic surface, forming a durable polymer layer. This is not dirt. This is a thin, inert coating that protects the vessel from rust and creates a non-stick surface far older than Teflon. The Japanese call this process kizushi, the act of building a patina. And master nabe makers will tell you that a pot with 30 years of seasoning is worth more than any new pot from the store. The crust is the pot's memory, and the pot's memory is the flavor's archive. So when I tell you about the plum wine jar that was never meant to be opened, I am not telling you a story about loss or neglect. I am telling you a story about the wisdom of leaving things intact. The seal was not a mistake. The granddaughter's refusal to open it was not hesitation. It was an understanding that some archives are best kept sealed, that the meaning of the wine was never in its consumption, but in its preservation. There is a strange courage in refusing to open what was entrusted to you, and it takes a kind of listening most of us have forgotten. Stay with this channel, and you'll hear more of these voices from the vessels. Tell me in the comments about a jar or a container you have kept sealed, not because you were afraid, but because you felt it held more meaning closed. And yet, the jar remains. The granddaughter grows older. One day she will leave the jar to someone else, or it will outlast her too. The cycle continues, and every time you look at the dusty jars on your own shelf, the ones you have been meaning to use but never quite got to, you might feel a shift in how you see them. They are not waiting to be consumed. They are waiting to be kept. The Kyoto jar may still be there 100 years from now, its contents further transformed, its seal still intact. The wine has become something that no longer belongs to the category of food. It belongs to the category of heirloom, of artifact, of a handprint in clay that still holds warmth. And every time a pot is left unwashed, every time a jar is left unopened, every time a dish is passed down with its crust intact, the grandmothers win. The archive grows, the flavor deepens, and the memory that was entrusted to the vessel remains alive, waiting, whispering. Not for the moment it will be tasted, but for the moment it will be remembered. So the next time you find yourself standing in your own kitchen, holding a pot that has seen more meals than you have decades, pause, run your fingers along its seasoned rim, feel the faint slickness of a million previous oil molecules bonded to the surface. That is not residue, that is history rendered into a tangible layer. A silent biography written in fats and patience. And in that moment, you might find yourself understanding the Kyoto granddaughter, the Hackney chef, and all the unnamed grandmothers who knew that a vessel is never just a tool. It is a keeper of memory, and memory does not expire. It only deepens. The jar in Kyoto sits in its same wooden shelf, the crust on its interior thickening by an invisible margin each passing day. No one touches it, no one opens it, and yet it continues to do its work, holding the breath of a summer that ended before the war began. The researcher from Tokyo University of Agriculture eventually published a paper about the jar, but left out its location. He understood, perhaps, that some artifacts are better left unexamined. The granddaughter visits it twice a year, on the anniversary of her grandmother's passing, and she sits beside it without speaking. She does not need to hear the wine gurgle. She does not need to taste the syrup. She already knows what it tastes like. It tastes like waiting. And waiting, in the language of fermentation, is not emptiness. It is the slowest form of cooking. The jars and pots that age alongside us are not forgotten. They are being simmered by time itself, and every minute that passes adds a new note to their archive. So when you hesitate to wash that old pan, when you let the crust remain, when you refuse to open a jar whose seal is older than you are not being careless, you are being a custodian. And that is the quietest, most sacred form of cooking there is. The pot was never meant to be empty. It was meant to be held